Good morning. The wisdom of this world is foolishness in the eyes of God. We look to all sorts of sources of wisdom in our lives, people who are learned, people who have experience, people who have been through stuff. But St. Paul tells us that the wisdom of the world is foolishness. Now, if we think of wisdom, then we look at this gospel passage, and Jesus gets in the boat with his apostles, and he says, okay, now put out into deep water and throw your net out to catch some fish. Jesus isn't a fisherman. He's a carpenter. He says, go out into the deep water, right, out into the unknown, and throw your net down. And the fishermen say to Jesus, the carpenter, they say, we, the fishermen, who have all our lives been fishermen, our fathers were fishermen, their fathers were fishermen, we've been fishing all night. So the wisdom would be, Jesus, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go back out because we're tired. We've already tried fishing tonight. It didn't work. That would be the wisdom of the world. But instead, the wisdom of God is they listen to the words of Jesus. They say, okay, don't understand, but at your command, we're going to do it because you know what you're doing. You have the words of spirit and life. And so they go out into the deeper waters, they throw the net over the side, and they catch this great catch of fish, unlike anything that they've ever caught before. The wisdom of the world tells us, preserve ourselves. The wisdom of the world says, avoid suffering. The wisdom of the world says, avoid pain. The wisdom of the world says, make sure that you've taken care of yourself. Gather all your possessions and your riches and your family and everything together and take care of yourself. The wisdom of Jesus says, take up your cross and follow me. Now, to those who are unbelievers, that's ridiculous. But to those of us who believe, those of us who have faith, we look to the cross and we say, the wisdom of the world says that will lead to harm. The wisdom of the world says that will lead to destruction. The wisdom of the world says, don't turn the other cheek. But the wisdom of God says, embrace that cross. Embrace that suffering. The wisdom of God says, don't live for yourself. Don't live for here and now. The wisdom of God says, live for heaven. God made us to know him, to love him, and to serve him in this world so that we may be happy with him forever in heaven. The way that we live now, the wisdom of our lives, the wisdom that we apply, that we use, ought to be wisdom that leads us closer to God. It's really easy to be wise like the world, and in some cases we need that, right? Jesus tells us, be innocent as doves and cunning as serpents. We need some degree of that worldly wisdom and knowledge, but that's to help us to pass through this world. That's to help us as we are pilgrims passing through the sea in the boat in which Peter is captain. But ultimately, that wisdom is to do the will of God, which the world will look at and laugh. The world will look at that and say, the wisdom of God is to surrender. The wisdom of God is to give up. The wisdom of God is to die. Yeah, that's the great paradox, isn't it? That Christ defeated death by dying. Christ gained eternal life for us by suffering. So yes, the wise may say, avoid suffering, avoid pain, avoid hardship. But the wisdom of God says, no, lean into it. Lean into it and allow it to be redemptive. Allow it to be salvific. So let us reflect on the wisdom of God that he gives us, the wisdom in which he helps us to better do his will, the wisdom in which he gives us to be able to take up our crosses daily and follow after him.